All right, and one further piece just before we get started, speaking of new technology, we are using software called Slido. It is a web-enabled question system to do live polls and Q&A. So if you go to www.sli.do, you can enter the event code ESC-JM, just as I'm doing here, and then join. This allows you to either anonymously or if you're comfortable, put your name in and ask any questions. And I will pause the presentation and we can take that, or we can even have discussions if you'd like. And then a little later, we're going to have a poll at the end of the presentation. It helps us to determine how we're doing for the presentation and what other things we can do going forward to be more relevant and answer any questions that you might have. The other piece that I'll mention is if you bring up your participant pane within the Zoom client, you should have the ability to raise your hand if you want to ask a question. I can actually, I think you can unmute yourselves and ask if you prefer that format as well. Everybody got me there?
Looks good.
All right, thank you.
Go ahead.
Okay. All right, so moving on. Just a couple of quick announcements from Energy Safety Canada here. Just stop my video so we can focus on what we have here up on the screen. On our website, we do have some COVID-19 updates of what we are doing. One of those things that we have done recently is offered certificate extensions, given that we cannot safely offer courses. So primary, of course, is H2S Alive. First line, second line, well service BOP. We have extended these certs to September 1st, 2020. So that is on our website. We do have communication out for that. We hope that will help industry, help companies and individuals get through this trying time. For anyone who wants to check, we do have a certificate validation tool available on our website. So with a student ID number, or if you have any Energy Safety Canada card that has a QR code on it, you can use that to check the extended certification dates. And then finally, in our webinar series, we are adding more content, but we have another one here coming up in about 2 weeks on eye safety and eye health. We are branching out with some subject matter experts. We've got Dr. Berger and Ismail Hajar of EyeSafe Alberta, their division of the Alberta Association of Optometry, going to give another lunch and learn presentation, and that is on Tuesday, April 14th. So if you're interested, please join us for that. All right, and back to our presentation. All right, quick agenda. We're going to have a safety moment pertaining to journey management, look at the project history and the task group, go over life-saving rules just briefly as they pertain to journey management, look at some statistics for the need for journey management. Why is this a focus? An overview of the program development guide that is available on the Energy Safety Canada website. Look at a few of the resources that we have tied to journey management, have some questions, and then if we have time, we have a re-release of the Worker's Guide to Hand Signals video. That's a resource that we put out a few years ago and have rebranded it with Energy Safety Canada. Okay, I do have a question up about extension of tickets. I'm going to defer that one when we hit the question period here. All right. Okay, moving on. What we have is a safety alert that was provided to us This is a video safety alert. There was a worker traveling down the Braden Road, that's between Dawson Creek and Fort St. John, in a tractor trailer. And this is, I believe it was last August. Was a clear day, a little wet, and we have some dash cam footage supplied that will document this. Now, this particular safety video is not, there's no audio to it, so no worries there. Here we go. So you have a driver, he's coming up the grade, 80K an hour. I'm just going to pause it here. Normally I like to ask everybody what kind of hazards that they see on the road up ahead of us. So common answers that we get are, well, it's very brushy. You could have animals or wildlife. This was a freshly paved road. There's no dividing line on the center. It is wet. Not a lot of room to exit in case of any kind of emergency. We've got a power line there on the left-hand side that could be of concern. We've got an uphill grade that limits our line of sight here. All right, we're just going to continue on now. A little oncoming vehicle. And 83, 85K an hour cresting, and and our driver slows down pretty rapidly to sub 10. And this is what we have coming down the other side here. So we'll just pause this. So we've got a guy who is broken down, ran out of gas, and he's got someone there helping him, or diesel, I guess I should say, and doing a bit of a refill operation. Probably the single worst place he could have broken down or chosen to stop. So not so good. And then you can see as we pass along here, loaded with pipe, and away we go. All right. So, question for the group. Thoughts about how a journey management program could have mitigated this situation. So there is a group chat there on in the Zoom app if anybody wants to submit anything, or if anyone wants to give a shout out, unmute. Just give you a moment. Pre-check prior to the trip. Someone has mentioned that. Road flares, hazard lights, warning as part of a journey management program. That's right. You know, making sure you have enough fuel to get there. Absolutely. Having places to refuel. Either one of these drivers putting out some flares as indicators. One of the things that we noted was, you know, why is this driver parked here as opposed to further up? Well, I could see that he wants to make it easy for any approaching traffic to pass to make it a shorter distance. So that was interesting. Someone has said no high vis vest, and given that this is in BC and they have pretty particular regulations from WorkSafe on that, yeah, absolutely. Set and setting hazard ID. Let's see here. What else do we have? Have a flagger further up the hill. Yeah, all things that we could have in emergency situations. Another thing that we thought of is if you knew you were going to be, you know, pretty short on fuel and likely could not get to where you were going, stopping in this low-lying area here where oncoming drivers from both sides can have a good look and time their approach to let oncoming traffic pass. Pretty much right at the crest of this hill is the worst place that we could be. All right. Let's see here. Apologies. Sounds like some people are having some difficulty hearing me. Arnold, do you have any issues on your side, or Dean?
No,
Hi, Andy.
I'm
Arnold here.
good here. I can hear you loud and clear.
Okay. All right. We will have the presentation available hopefully early next week if I can get it through IT for any of those who are having computer audio difficulties. I do apologize. One moment. I guess if you can't hear me, you probably didn't hear me say that. So just one moment there, folks. And I'm just going to reply to this Zoom chat. Okay. All right. We're going to move on there. So some technical difficulties, I'm sure we'll work some of those out going forward. But if the majority can hear us, away we go. All right. Now, that was provided from industry to Energy Safety Canada, and our best resources do come from collaboration with industry. If you would like to sign up for our safety alerts, our safety bulletins, or any changes to our courses, and you don't currently get that, if you navigate to our website, energysafetycanada.com, under the resources tab, you can subscribe and you can personalize that to your area of operations, be that BC, Alberta, Saskatchewan, and you can sign up for safety alerts, training or course updates, safety bulletins, so we don't flood your inbox with things that are not necessarily pertinent to you. Also on our events calendar, that is where you can find the upcoming webinars and other presentations that we have. Also under resources, you can submit to us a safety alert of any near miss or incident that you have. Like I say, our best resources and our best learnings do come from the field, and we do our best to anonymize that, to not point out any particular company or shame anyone. When we have multiple services involved, we go through a rigorous process to ensure that all companies involved are consulted, and we do have approval to go forward with issuing a safety alert. All right, moving on to the Journey Management Program Development Guide. The original request for a resource to aid in creation of a journey management program did come from the CAODC back in 2013, and the first edition of that guideline was released in 2015. Now, periodically, Energy Safety Canada does reviews and updates to all of its resources to ensure they're valid and reflect what's happening in industry and the latest best practices. So to that, we pulled together a task group from industry. We do not stand on our soapbox and dictate how you must run your company. We get knowledgeable people from industry on these topics and try and craft the best resources that we can for you. To that end, these are our 6 task group members who we had. Brian Miskey of Tier 1 Energy Solutions, Chris Frank of Precision Well Servicing, Eric Plant of Calfrac, Nicole Barnes, Synovus, Rod Garland, the CAGC, and Scott Lothar of PetroChina Canada. So we do pull from all sectors to try and get all different views represented. Unfortunately, Brian Miskey was supposed to co-present with me, but he got pulled away with some urgent COVID-19 issues. Oops, pardon me. So he may join us later, and we might be able to get some questions answered from him. 1 minute, we just have someone having difficulties accessing the meeting. I'm just going to try and, oops, add them in here. 1 second. All right. Moving ahead. Life-saving rules. So in 2018, after the merger of Enforma and OSA, one of the first standards that we pursued was the creation of some life-saving rules that could be common to the oil and gas sector. We came up with 10 life-saving rules based upon the greatest potential for serious injuries and fatalities, and those came primarily from the IOGP. So if you look at fatalities from 2001 to 2017 within the oil and gas funding codes of Western Canada, it averaged 20 fatalities per year that pertained to life-saving rules. So over 16 lives per year potentially would have been saved with adherence to the 10 rules that we came up with. As I said, the 9 were taken directly from IOGP, with the additional 10th fit for duty that we created for Canadian operations. And the IOGP is looking at that. And so we're perhaps influencing some of the international companies. So some good work there. Now you'll notice that we do actually have a specific driving life-saving rule. So that particular rule has some guidance with it that I always wear a seatbelt. I do not exceed the speed limit and reduce my speed for conditions. I do not use phones or operate devices while driving. I am fit, rested, and fully alert while driving, and I follow journey management requirements. So inherently here, it alludes to the fact that we should have a journey management program. All right, getting to some data, the need for journey management. When we looked at the data from the Alberta WCB from 2014 to 2018, that gives us a good 5-year window, we found that 13 of those fatalities were from highway accidents. So that represented 54% of the fatalities in the upstream oil and gas sector of Alberta. So a pretty big percentage. So if you look at, where do you really want to invest your time and energy, preventing fatalities should be fairly high on that list, and a good focus on driving and journey management can certainly help that. So if anyone is looking for some backup in terms of data, these charts are available in the program development guide. Here we have some photos of an actual incident. I actually worked for one of these companies at the time. I believe there were 2 of the fatalities in that chart were the drivers of each of these vehicles. The white truck on the left, some of you might recognize as a wireline truck from the rocket launchers on the back. There were 2 passengers, I believe, in that vehicle who were not fatalities, so that's good. But this has some interesting similarities to that safety alert or safety moment that we had early on. The white pickup was coming up, cresting a hill, and couldn't see. Didn't have a lot of time to react, and the red one, sadly, was coming up sideways, and some pretty catastrophic consequences. So the reason that I have this on here is I want to reinforce that it's the human component that we're trying to address. This is the need for journey management. These are the events we really want to eliminate. Looking at some further data between 2014 and 2018, we found that vehicle-related incidents were responsible for 6% of the claims, 9% of the lost days, and 12% of all claims costs. So that makes sense, because when we have a motor vehicle incident, typically we're going to get injured, we're going to have lost days, and the cost is going to be quite severe. So that's the claim cost versus claim count doubling pretty much. So again, a little more data on there. If you're a small company and you don't have a lot to go on, you need to create a journey management program. You can look at some of these industry-wide statistics and say, well, this is why this is pertinent. Although it has not happened to us, it potentially could. All right, on to establishing a journey management program. So the core of a journey management program is how do we identify and how do we manage risk? And that risk tolerance is an organizational decision. There's no single solution that is going to work for everyone. If I'm a small vac truck company with only a couple of trucks, it doesn't make sense that I'm going to have the same type of journey management program as let's say a large fracking company who has a lot of guys in convoy. And I might have some different, or my organization might have different risk tolerance based on where I operate in, let's say, southern Saskatchewan than in northeast BC with different road conditions. You know, a snowstorm in northern BC is going to be very different than one in southern Alberta. So that can't be, we can't create a blanket program and put that out to industry. So. All right. The other thing is how do workers view the hazards and the risks? And this is something that as a service manager I had to deal with. You know, you have a young 20-year-old guy who, you know, looks out and doesn't see any issue with going to work, you know, after a heavy snowfall. But then you might get an older guy who's got a lot more experience, and he might, you know, really reconsider, put that trip back an hour, make sure he drives a little slower. So that risk tolerance from some of the people sometimes needs to be aligned to what the organization thinks. So that's something we can talk about a little later here in the overview. Now there's not a single journey management program that can fit for every organization, but there's a common framework that the program development guide outlines, and there are common elements that a lot of very good journey management programs do use, and that can be used consistently to establish a good program. So let's go over those. So starting a journey management program starts with leadership and commitment, and that is a company policy having standards and commitment and accountability. As a safety professional, you can have the best idea for a program to improve safety in your organization, but without buy-in from leadership, without support, without a little bit of funding to promote that, that's not going to go anywhere. So leadership commitment is number one. And then even though organizations vary in size, comprehensive programs have these four fundamental areas: planning, risk identification, and then risk mitigation or reduction, confirmation of that risk evaluation and sign off, the actual commencement and completion, and then program review and continuous improvement. And when establishing a journey management program, one of the things we outlined in the guideline is going through training and competence. So training and to be competent in driving different types of vehicles. The example we have here is tri-axle versus a body job. The company risk assessment criteria and what systems are used. We have to train our workers to use the systems that are in place, be that a paper-based system or maybe a smartphone-based app. We need to train them on what to do when conditions change. Driving is a dynamic environment. When I leave Calgary and I'm headed to Grand Prairie today, we might have a medium risk trip based on our criteria, but that changes. Perhaps by the time I get to Red Deer, things have gotten a little worse. Well, at what point does that go from medium to high, and what's the escalation protocol for that? Who's required to use a company journey management program? An example we have here are contractors versus employers. Prime contractors will sometimes use a subcontractor to de-risk. So do you expect them to use the company journey management program, or are they expected to have their own? If not, do they fall under your program? Another consideration would be, is this only for field-based employees who travel to and from the job site, or would that apply to office-based staff? What about doing a safety stand down when a president or vice president goes to visit a well site or a seismic program? What's the division there? So questions that we need to answer. And then, is there travel that is exempted from the company journey management program? If I'm driving from Calgary to Airdrie, would that count? Or if I'm going from Fort St. John to Dawson Creek, a pretty short trip, are we comfortable with the level of risk that we don't need to do that? So all things that we need to consider for our individual programs. Another thing that many programs have in common, although not all, although they should, is a program review. Is that program effective? Are the risks managed, and do we actually measure the outcomes? Some common metrics that we identified in the guideline are the number of journeys, the times of the journeys, the number of low, medium, or high risk, the distance traveled, the number of escalations from low to high or medium to high. The date and time of incidents. Do you have a trend, for example, in, well, we see a lot of incidents between 11 and 12 at night? Or do we have a lot of incidents after Christmas when we're really getting back to work? Would that be a good time to focus on journey management and being a little more proactive? So all things to consider in tracking metrics. Now, I will mention that some of the paper-based programs are a little difficult. It's harder to do that kind of tracking, but there are software applications that can report on these metrics a little easier. All right, just have a comment here. The slide deck is showing up blurry. Apologize for that. Looks like you might have a connectivity issue. Got another message here that says it's fine, so apologies. Most major oil and gas companies require a contractor to have a journey management program no matter the distance. Yeah, I have seen that for sure. I guess that can be a point of conversation on under what point, if you're moving from camp to a well site, 3 or 5K, does that mean you have to use journey management or not? These are all things that I think can fall under a company journey management plan, and as long as you're covering it, the prime should be all right with that. If any prime contractors on there, I think we've got Brent on here, or Dean, or anyone else. Please pipe up and let me know what your thoughts are on expectations. All right, executing journey management. So when we go to execute that, we've got a few pieces here: determine the necessity of the journey, assess hazards, develop controls, get approvals, undertake and complete the journey. Now, determine the necessity of the journey. Well, think COVID-19. I originally was intending to do this presentation up live in Lloydminster, but due to some travel hazards, not necessarily vehicular, we did have to delay that, and we came up with an alternative mechanism. So do we really need to do that? There's another anecdote that I'll provide here. I worked for a large service company at one point in my career, and there was a safety stand down, much like I had mentioned earlier. Senior executives headed to an oil sand site at 4 p.m. Weather conditions were poor. It was snowing. The roads were quite slick. And at that time of day, there was single lane traffic in and out of that particular location. And most of the traffic was going the other direction. So the company called in, the North American Health and Safety Manager called to get journey management approval. He talked to an old wireline operator who knew that route pretty well. He worked a lot of his career up there, and he said, the first question on that journey management program is this trip necessary? And that answer is no, you're not going. So the North American president got shut down by old wireline guy. And the funny part is it goes to that leadership piece. They couldn't have been happier. They said, well, we are subject to the same rules as our field personnel, and they respected that. And I guess it worked out because we still tell that story today. Hazard assessment, and we've got a section on hazard assessment in the guideline where we break it down into 3 different categories: road hazards, drive hazards, and vehicle hazards. Road hazards refer to road conditions, other traffic, animal activity. Driver hazards, is that driver fit for duty? Distracted driving, risk tolerance. As I mentioned, you have a 20-year-old guy. He's going to have very different risk tolerance than a more experienced operator. That said, some of the younger operators might have, I shouldn't say that only the senior guys are less risk tolerant. One of the analysis that I have seen, not simply based on driving, was that younger workers tend to have more accidents that are lower consequence, and older workers have had accidents that more often killed them because they knew about the more frequent dangers, but they would take risks that didn't happen that the consequences were less often, but substantially more severe. So risk tolerance, definitely something to look at. And then vehicle hazards, cargo, roadworthiness, and vehicle capacity. Perhaps not these days, but typically when we're driving to work, have we seen vehicles that we really question whether they should be on the road, whether or not the cargo is strapped down as it should be? Have we seen a vehicle that's going way too fast, and you question whether or not that guy can come to a stop? So can all be part of the hazard assessment. And again, this is something that's going to vary from company to company. If I'm a small directional drilling firm and I run a fleet of F-150 pickups, my hazard assessment is going to be different than, let's say, that vac truck company who's hauling dangerous product and fluid. Got a comment here. Check stops still tell us that many vehicles are unsafe from a mechanical standpoint. That's absolutely true. I was at a presentation up in our Fort St. John office, and we had one of the vehicle inspectors tell us about some of the horror stories that they've seen. So thank you, D. Davis. So. All right, develop controls, and here we follow the classic hierarchy of elimination, substitution, engineering controls, administrative, and PPE. So what kind of controls can we put in place? Road controls like alternative routes, adjusting to conditions, driving convoy if that's possible. Driver controls, competence verifications, check-ins, hours of service, missed check-in escalation. Fatigue management program, and vehicle controls, cargo securement, vehicle inspections, emergency equipment, and in-vehicle monitoring systems. I actually just remembered something from this last piece here. I got an email this morning on dealing with fit for duty for drivers. It was one moment. I thought this was quite pertinent, actually. I think it was an NSC standard. Where'd that go? NSC Code 6, determining fitness to drive in Canada, January 2020. This was just released. Here we go. From the Canadian Council of Motor Transport Administrators, model for driver fitness program. So This resource, I'm not sure is captured in our resource list for journey management, but that's something that's definitely out there now as of January. So I'll try and make sure we update the webpage for that. Competence verification. I wanted to make a quick aside for that. I had a good friend of mine who he worked for a fracking outfit, and one day they were not particularly busy, and they had a call-out job, and his supervisor said, "Hey, are you competent to drive and run the blender?" Oh yeah, absolutely I am. And off he got in the blender and he went. And I asked him, I'm like, well, how have you ever done that before? Well, no, but I've seen other guys who do it. And I'm like, I had to laugh. I'm like, wow, that's quite the competency management framework that they have. So competency isn't just asking your workers if they're competent, particularly in today's environment when they might not be working for a while. Now, competency is its own beast that we'll probably have a presentation on going forward, but competency verification is extremely important, especially with the revisions that were made last year to the Occupational Health and Safety Act here in Alberta, and I know BC and Saskatchewan have their own particular focuses on that as well. All right. Approvals. So this is verification of the risk assessment, looking at the mitigations that actually lower risk to the accepted level. And this this is a good time to go over the reevaluation of those dynamic conditions that we did speak about. Periodic check-ins. What do we do with a missed check-in escalation? That's one of the most common things in a journey management program. A driver either can't pull over to make a call, so he's late by a few minutes, or they simply forget. One of the anecdotes that I'll mention, again, when I was a service manager, one of the best things that we ever did to eliminate missed check-ins, or reduce them, I should say, we went to the dollar store and bought a pile of kitchen timers. And we had a requirement at the time that our drivers had to check in every 2 hours. So that was a very simple thing that we did to help make that easy for our drivers to do. One of the other pieces with missed check-ins, and I've seen this quite a bit as well, nothing can derail a journey management program like having your drivers feel that it's just a paper exercise. What happens when they miss that check-in, and does anybody actually follow up on them? I've seen that companies go, well, I've missed my check-in and nobody checked on me for 2-3 more hours. So that missed check-in protocol is something that we detail greatly in the program development guideline that I encourage people to focus on. And then go back to that, when does the risk change and what's the go forward process? If I'm driving up to a job and it's not going to start until I get there, if I've got to stop for 2 or 3 hours or suspend my journey until the next day, what's the go forward process for that? Are you going to be putting your own workers in a great deal of stress where they feel that they have to get to that job and drive in rather nasty conditions? What kind of risk are we, indirectly imposing on them? So something to consider on the approval side. And now finally, undertaking the journey and executing that plan. Again, this is reevaluations of risk and conditions for that driver or drivers. Doing that periodic check-in and the missed check-in escalation. Now, a journey management program should also tie into some emergency response. And now we don't specifically get into what that is going to look like, but emergency response program should be attached. Going back to if I'm a fluid hauler and I've got a regular route that I'm going to go on, and it's primary highways, and we've got access to resources, vehicle recovery, tow trucks, ambulances are not too far off the road. That's fine. But what if I'm a small geophysical driller? and we're out in the middle of nowhere, and there aren't the resources to come out and do some of that rescue. What are the options? What are the escalations? So something to consider. What do we do when these types of things happen? Or are you leaning on the prime contractor to provide some of those resources? So something to consider here. I'll also offer, had a conversation with a transport company. They had a journey management program, and their driver missed a turnoff and ended up getting stuck out of communication, out of service range. And in oil and gas, that's going to happen quite often. Well, normally, that driver would have, hopped out of his truck and, walked a couple of K back. He wasn't that far off, but he had a bear outside his truck that wouldn't leave. So he was there for a couple hours. So the oil and gas producer called and said, "Hey, where is this guy?" And they couldn't get in contact with him. Eventually, they sent out a search party, but there was some defects in that journey management program that were highlighted. The guy didn't show up. There was no missed check-in escalation, and the service provider got their hands slapped a little bit. Now they were able to find him. His GPS worked just fine. So that's how the search and rescue team knew where to go and found him and scared the bear off. So anyhow. All right, finally, completing the journey. Reporting hazardous situations and near misses, documenting your vehicle inspections, debrief with the journey manager and doing that check-in. This relates back to maybe that window of check-in time. This is missed a lot that I've seen guys get to the job site or get home and they forget to do their final check-in and close out their journey. Completing the journey, also finalizing those trip details and those tracking metrics for continuous improvement. Going back to our safety moment we started the presentation with, obviously they detailed that near miss, that the blind hill, and put that out for industry, so industry could be aware. All right, resources. So on our journey management webpage, we do have a few resources available. We've got a journey management form that's there for download and edit. It does look a little complicated, but it is quite comprehensive. And after you do it once or twice, it's actually not that bad. There is from Road Safety at Work. They're a linked website there. There's a bit of a simpler journey management trip plan there. And there's also an online tool called Trip Check. And as you can see, step one is the trip necessary. This is software, or pardon me, just a web page that will walk you through the process, but it's got some neat little features in that it'll allow you to send a copy of what the driver fills out to themselves and also to a manager for approval. So there are a couple little pieces in here. And I believe in the appendix of the journey management document, we do outline all the various NSC standards and some other references, for example, to CCMTA. All right, I'm going to open the floor to any other questions. Just checking on Slido here. I'll give everybody a minute or two to go to Slido or to ask any questions on the group chat. Not part of journey management, but since so many leaders are here, what is everyone doing in regards to expiring tickets outside of ESC delivered certs like first aid, GDL level 2? Let's see here. I have not heard of first aid tickets. Oh no, I did. I thought St. John's First Aid did extend their tickets. Dean, can you weigh in on that? What have you seen up in your area?
I've seen nothing on first aid yet. Just waiting to hear from the vendors on that. All other tickets, we're basically extending or deferring their expiries as well, even in-house for any classroom-led stuff. CBTs, we're still going ahead and getting them restarted. So.
All right, thank you. Courtney says extended by 3 months, she thought. So, yeah, not sure, but I did think that was extended as well. BC has a 90-day extension. St. John's extended and seemed to offer online, but in-person assessment required within 3 months. Okay, that's interesting. And, you know, we took that approach as well, just because, you know, yesterday they were good, today they didn't forget everything. So but we do put in our same with Red Cross, we did put in our bulletin there that you know, if a company wanted to say no, we absolutely need to do some additional training, that's up to them. So Tony says, my understanding from St. John's Ambulance, there is a 3 months extension and that will be reviewed again in May. Thank you, Tony. All right, I think we've answered that one. What else do we have here? Why isn't there more of a focus on emergency management for the resource road / prime owner? I've responded to Rex and waited 2 hours for the nearest VFD to respond. VFT, Volunteer Fire Department, I'm guessing. Like I said, this is a framework for developing a journey management program. It's difficult to get that granular with it. Again, I've dealt with midstream producers who are on pretty regular roads. That's not an issue for them. Then again, you know, the seismic guys who I work with, they are in the bush, and it can take quite some time to get some aid. Agreed that that's a problem to whoever posted this, but it's just a little outside the scope of what we were able to do with that particular guideline. All right. We have heard from local Aztec training that there's an extension. Okay, that's good. Due to the COVID-19 coronavirus outbreak, WorkSafe BC is granting extensions on any occupational first aid or equivalent certifications that are due to expire between March 1st, 2020 and June 30th, 2020. These certificates will be acceptable in the workplace for 90 days beyond their original expiry date. Thank you for that. Okay, looks like that's it for questions. I'll keep this open in case anybody wants to ask anything else. Just going to take our last few minutes here and talk about the Worker's Guide to Hand Signals for Directing Vehicles. So that was formerly IRP 12. That was developed way back in 2000 at the request of the Canadian Association of Geophysical Contractors. Was updated in 2014 as an N-form guideline. They transferred the non-technical IRPs into guidelines. In 2018, we actually rebranded that in Energy Safety Canada form. But now in 2020, we had a video, but we needed to do some rebranding on that. So we've released that. And we do also have posters and laminated wallet cards available in our online store if anyone is interested. The wallet cards, I believe, are $8 for a stack of 50, and they're laminated, kind of heavier duty, so they'll hold up in your wallet. Let's see here. And we do have this video, and I believe we are optimized to share this. I do apologize for those who have had some choppy connections. This takes a couple of minutes and we'll close out after this.
Welcome back, football fans. We're in the final minutes of what has to be the worst refereed game I've ever witnessed.
I hear you, Roy. This guy must have slept through the hand signals class at ref school. He ain't got a clue.
When this is over, I'm sure both teams will have a few choice hand signals for this ref. It's 2nd and 10, and the Drillers are clinging to a 1-point lead against the Blasters. Hold on. What's he doing now? Touchdown, Blasters. They haven't even snapped the ball. I don't believe it. Wait, both benches are clearing. Everyone's on the field. They're all after the ref. This is not going to end well. Oh no, cut to commercial. You know, folks, it didn't have to end this way. It's easy to learn and use the correct hand signals. The more we all use them, the safer we are. And it could mean you won't end up in a hospital bed next to this guy, or worse. Let me walk you through the basics. There are 6 hand signals in the Worker's Guide to Hand Signals for Directing Vehicles that you need to know. Think of them as your game day playbook. The signals are emergency stop, planned stop, proceed slowly, left and right turns, distance to stopping, and clear to leave area. Now, if you're the QB, knowing the playbook is useless if nobody else on your team knows it. Even Chuck knows that. So before you start the play, the driver and the guide need to huddle to make sure they both know the signals and the path they're going to follow, and any potential hazards. Remember, whether you're driving or directing, good communication is the best way to control and eliminate vehicle hazards. What's that, Chuck? Yeah, you need to be able to see each other too. If you're a guide, wear your high vis and make sure it's clean and done up so you can be seen, especially in low light. Maintain eye contact with the driver and keep him up to date on your plays. So let's get started, and I want to see you doing these as you watch him. Get your arms up. The first play is the emergency stop.
This is a big one and trumps all other plays. I mean signals. If you see a situation that needs immediate action, this tells the driver to stop immediately. No messing about. Start with your hands crossed over your head and extend them down to the side repeatedly. Rapid movements are more likely to be seen by the driver, so do it quickly until he stops. And the driver shouldn't start again until he gets a signal to move or checks with the guide that it's safe to move. If it's not an emergency, there's a different signal for stop. The planned stop is used to reposition the guide or tell the driver when they're at the final stop point. This is a simple one. Raise your arms until your wrists are crossed above your head. And remember to keep your arms high so you can see the driver and he can see you. Okay, next up is the proceed slowly signal. Roll the video. And when I say slowly, I'm talking about walking speed with the vehicle geared low. Start with your arms out in front of you at about 45 degrees from your body and your palms facing the direction of travel. Keep your wrists locked and bend both arms toward your head. Remember, this is the whole forearm that moves. None of this wrist stuff. And don't just do it a couple of times and head for the showers. Keep moving your arms until you're ready to give the stop signal. Hold on, stop it right there. Did you see that? What's the rule we all learned in college ball? If you can't see the driver can't see you. This is important. And if the driver can't see you, he's got to stop right away. And don't walk backwards while you're directing. Stop the vehicle, then reposition yourself before starting again. And one more thing, never, ever stand directly behind a moving vehicle. No one should ever cross or step behind a moving vehicle, or if the backup warning device is activated. Okay, so you've directed the vehicle without any fumbles, and we're getting close to its final position. Now we need to show the driver the distance to stopping point signal. Start with your arms out to the sides of your body and your palms pointed forward. As the vehicle gets closer, move your arms closer together above your head. But remember, we're not showing a specific distance. This doesn't mean about a foot. You're showing proportional distance to the driver. And when you're done, finish with the planned stop signal. Now, if you're thinking about running a drag route in your game, it's time to talk about turns. The turn signal starts with your arms extended to both sides, with one arm pointing in the direction of the turn and the other moving towards your head, like we did in the proceed slowly signal. And like before, keep those wrists locked and don't stop the signal until the turn is done or you need to stop the vehicle. This is where staying inside of the driver is tricky. If you're going to lose contact, stop the vehicle and move to a new position. Remember, never stand directly behind a moving vehicle if you want to get home safely to your family. Okay, last signal now. You're doing great. Cleared to leave area means it's safe for the driver to move out, but you've got to tell him where to go and confirm that it's his turn to leave. So start by pointing at the driver so everyone knows which driver you're signaling to. Wait for a nod or some signal that he understands, then extend both arms in the direction you want the vehicle to move. And you can repeat this a few times if you need to. Hey, now you know more about hand signals than a certain referee. But be sure to practice. Rewind this video and watch the game highlights a few times. What did we learn? Plan your vehicle movement with the driver before you start. Keep the signals coming until the move is complete or you need to stop and move. And never lose sight of the driver, even if there are cheerleaders on the field. But the most important thing to remember is to protect your quarterback, and that's you. Now, I'm taking Chuck out for a beer. I'll see you next week when the Pipeliners are taking on the Snubbers.
All right, so happy to have that out there. Hopefully that can be useful. About 5 minutes, so good to show your field crews. Can maybe have a quick safety meeting about that. All right. Brian asked, great video. When can we use it? You can use it now. It is up and available on our website and on the YouTube channel. So, good question. Couple of questions here. Gord has asked, any opinions on how to mitigate distracted driving with two-way radios? And Tony mentioned, Gord, we're struggling with this as well. My guys travel to the drilling rigs on radio controlled, and we're not. And even though we are not allowed to use our cell phones, you have to radio in every kilometer, and there are many that are not. We've had a few incidents northeast of Fort St. John this winter. Okay, something about that, because this came up with our life-saving rules, actually. You know, when on radio-controlled roads, and you have to, you know, you call out your kilometers, is that a violation of a life-saving rule? And the way we look at it is, well, no, that's using a control. Now, if you were jabbering on that radio all the time, then yeah, that would be outside of the scope of what you're supposed to be doing with that. So we're going to have a life-saving rules task group to talk about some of these challenges where rules would seemingly be in conflict. So something there to for a future topic. So back to the hand signals video. Yes, under resources for the website. If you do a search for hand signals or worker's guide to hand signals, it is there. Or if you go to YouTube and look for Energy Safety Canada, we don't have many videos, but it is located there as well. All right, finally, just closing out here, down to the wire. We are looking for your feedback. So if you go to www.sli.do, Slido, and go into the Energy Safety Canada event, ESC-JM, we have a poll up, and just to give us some feedback on our event, should take no longer than 2 minutes. Just curious on some demographics, what sector you represent, on the registration process, on the presentation, and what you would like to see going forward. What other events or topics would you like? And that is all I had, unless anybody else has any questions, or if you would like some follow-up, send a question in the audience Q&A. That's not public. I can view those before they're released, and I will get back to you. With that, it is 1 o'clock, so I'll leave this up here for about 10 more minutes. Thank you all very much.
Thanks, Andy.
Thank you.
Yeah, you bet. Thanks.